The woods loomed large around me as I ventured deeper into the night, haunted by guilt and fear. My younger brother, driven by my taunts and jeers, had wandered into the foreboding forest. It was a place with a sinister reputation, known for swallowing up countless children over the years. Despite being new to the town, my family had been blissfully ignorant of the dark secrets held by the looming trees. As I trudged through the thick underbrush, my senses heightened. The air was dense with an otherworldly chill, and an eerie silence clung to the surroundings. The only sound that reached my ears was the rustling of leaves beneath my feet and the occasional hoot of an owl, as if the forest itself was whispering ominous secrets. The unsettling journey took a turn for the macabre when I stumbled upon the first of many grisly sights. Dead animals, deer, squirrels, raccoons, foxes, and even a bear, lay strewn across the forest floor. Their lifeless eyes stared into nothingness, and an inexplicable dread gnawed at my insides. A lone rabbit, seemingly undeterred by the deathly atmosphere, began to follow me with an almost unnatural determination. With each step, the tension in the air thickened. The woods seemed to come alive with a ghastly energy, and my unease deepened. I quickened my pace, trying to shake off the feeling of being watched. However, the rabbit persisted, its presence growing more unnerving by the moment. Desperation led me to a dilapidated cabin hidden in the heart of the woods. Its creaking door swung open with a haunting wail as I cautiously entered. The interior was a gruesome tableau, dead animal carcasses, their rotting stench permeating the air. In the center of the room, a sinister sight awaited me, a blood-stained ritual circle adorned with the remnants of dark ceremonies. At its center lay a severed human hand, a macabre centerpiece with a blood trail leading to the basement. Summoning my courage, I descended into the abyss beneath the cabin. The air grew colder, and the dim light revealed a horrific scene. The basement was a chamber of nightmares, filled with small bones and the decaying remains of lost children. Dread consumed me as I recognized my brother's lifeless body nailed to the wall. On his forehead, written in blood, was the ominous word, rabbit. A sickening realization crept over me. The zombie animals were not aggressors. They were guardians, trying to ward me away from the true horror lurking in the woods. The persistent rabbit, I now understood, was my brother, a guardian cursed to protect the secret he now embodied. Outside, the moans and gurgles of the zombie animals had transformed from threats to desperate warnings. The rabbit's cries were the loudest, a plea for me to escape the impending danger. The forest itself seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy as footsteps echoed from the descending staircase. I hid in the shadows, my heart pounding in my chest, as an elderly woman with short gray hair emerged. Naked and adorned with a bloody antler piercing her skull, she exuded an aura of pure malevolence. Decorated with remnants of rotted child flesh, she descended the stairs with purpose. Frozen with terror, I watched as she approached. The room seemed to close in around me, and the air turned thick with an indescribable malevolence. She seized me with a brutal grip, her touch sending shivers down my spine. In an instant, she ended my life with a chilling finality. Yet death was not the end. I awoke in the heart of the forest, my body battered and vision blurred. Limping through the cold darkness, I could make out a figure in the shadows, the rabbit, my brother. With a strange sense of connection, I approached him, and he, in turn, moved closer to me. Our fates were intertwined, bound to the cursed woods for an eternity of horrors. Together, my brother and I became wanderers in the chilling forest, a twisted and nightmarish existence stretching into the unknown. The echoes of the past and the moans of the zombie animals accompanied us, a haunting reminder of the malevolence that lurked within the shadows. And so, we hobbled through the cold, our lives forever entwined in the macabre dance of the cursed woods. There are 2 episodes that tie for first place with me. I will tell you about the one that happened first. I grew up in a haunted house. Doors would slam. We would hear footsteps in the ceiling when our house was a one-level ranch. We would get feelings of being watched, smell roses, think we heard our name being called quickly from the other end of the house. When I was 16, I had already started having premonitions, one episode of hearing a spirit, saw one demon when I was in elementary school, along with what I already mentioned. It was the middle of summer, and sweltering hot. We didn't have air conditioning, and for some reason someone thought it would be a good idea to put our rectangular windows at the top of our 12-foot ceilings. My bedroom was along the front of the house just beside our front door. My window was to the left of our front porch. We had a cement slab for a front porch, and for our landscaping, we had white marble stones. If anybody wanted to touch my bedroom window from the outside, they would have had to get a ladder. Anyway, I was at my friend's house. Her house sat at the top of the hill, and we would stand in her kitchen and talk while we were looking out her window at the town beneath us. All of her family lived in this little town. Her family was great. They were all so kind and loving. One day we saw her uncle drive up the hill towards her house. He was in his new 1976 metallic green Corvette with a T-top roof. I got a horrible feeling. I had this feeling before and it scared me. I told her, "Your uncle's going to get killed in that car." She said, "Yeah, he drives like a crazy maniac." I said, "You're not understanding me. He is going to get killed in that car." She just looked at me and said to stop it. Every time I saw him I got the same feeling. The closer I was to him, the more intense it got, to the point that when I was in a room with him I would have a horrible feeling of dread, smell mud, and when I would look at him I would get horrible pains in my eyes that would go to the back of my head and shoot down into my chest. I would get weak in my knees, cold and clammy, short of breath, and feel like I was going to pass out. All I could do was tell my mom about it. So I did. A couple weeks later, about 6:30 in the morning, the phone in my house rang. I heard my mom pick it up and say, "I can't understand you. Honey, I don't know what you're saying. What happened? Let me get her." My mom came into my room to wake me up and tell me that the phone was for me. I said, "Lisa's Uncle Jim got killed last night, didn't he?" She said that she didn't know because she couldn't understand what she was saying because she was crying so hard. Well, that's exactly what happened. He did not negotiate a bend and flipped the car end over end, then barrel rolled, and he got caught on and was crushed under the T-top as it rolled. It crushed his head, neck and chest. At the scene of the accident, the ground was very soft, and the ground was all torn up. The smell of mud was strong, just like I smelled in my premonition. This accident happened about 1.5 miles away from my house. Needless to say, my friend was devastated. They were close. But my friend also could be classified as a bitch. She would be the first one to admit it. The last time they were together she argued with him. The last thing she said to him was, "I hate you." This really bothered her. She felt so bad that that was the last thing she said to him. A week later he was buried. Closed casket. She asked to stay overnight at my house because she needed to get away from all of the grieving that was going on at hers. So we pulled out our big cushions and she slept on the floor at the foot of my bed. My bed, which just happened to be underneath my window, that was next to our front door. Being the middle of a sweltering hot summer, I slept with my window open. That night I suddenly woke up from a deep sleep at 3:15 a.m. I was immediately scared. I had a feeling that something terrifying was going to happen. To say it was impending doom was a huge understatement. I felt a presence near me and my fear was quickly growing. I could hear in the distance footsteps coming down the road from the direction of the accident. It sounded like someone walking with a limp, as her uncle did. I knew exactly who it was and I was frozen with fear. I pulled the covers up over my head. My heart rate was sky high. I was sweltering hot, but I didn't care because I didn't want to see what I knew was coming to me. I didn't want to see him like he was after the accident. I could hear the footsteps getting closer until they were in front of my house. I was praying that they would stop. But they didn't. I could hear the footsteps coming up my hardtop driveway, across my cement sidewalk and onto my porch, just next to my window. Then I heard a knocking on our screen door. We always kept our screen door locked at night. We also kept our heavy wooden front door locked. I was praying that my mother would hear somebody knocking at the door. But she didn't. It knocked again on the screen door. Then I heard a crunch, crunch, crunch across our landscape stone to just under my window. Then I heard a Tap, 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 in the middle of my 12-foot-high window. I thought I was going to have a heart attack. My heart was pounding so hard. I lay there, frozen in fear, with my covers over my head, and drenched with sweat. I heard the crunch, 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 back to the porch and the tap, 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 on the screen door. The footsteps came once more on the stones, and the tapping turned into pounding on my window. This time it was faster and more intense. It was banging so hard on my window I thought it would break. This happened another couple times, back and forth, faster and more intense each time. Then, when it was at the screen door, the tap turned into the whole screen door vibrating so furiously that it blew open with so much force that the door hit the brick wall of my house and the handle to the screen door took a chunk out of the brick. I was so hoping that Lisa would hear what was happening and wake up. But she didn't. I thought for sure my mother, who could always hear the slightest sound through the night and wake up, would hear this and wake up. But she didn't. Then I could hear the locked door knob on my front door being turned side to side so fast and furiously that no human being could possibly have done it. Then I heard the crunch, crunch, crunch on the landscaping stone again, and this time, instead of a banging on my window, my whole window started vibrating so intensely that I thought for sure my window was going to explode. I pulled the covers up over my head as tight as I could, expecting a shower of glass, my heart racing faster than it ever did before. It was at that point that I must have passed out from fear. The next thing I remember was waking up, so thankful that it was over and that I lived through it without seeing what I know would have terrified me into a fatal heart attack. Right away, in my mind I started going through everything that happened. I knew I did not dream it. I didn't want to say anything to Lisa to upset her more. She got up and went into the kitchen to get breakfast. As soon as she left the room, my mom came in and asked me if I heard anything in the house last night. Shocked, I asked why. She said she was trying to sleep, and heard footsteps come into her room, cross the room, and along the side of her bed to stop by her head. She thought it was me coming to get her because Lisa was upset again. So she rolled over and looked, expecting to see me, and feeling a presence there. Next, she heard the footsteps go down the side of her bed, across the room and out her open door into the hall, and stop outside my closed door. About 30 seconds later the footsteps came back out, and down the hall and into the living room. She got up to see what in the world was going on. My mom had many paranormal things happen to her before and wasn't scared. She went to the front door and put her hand on the doorknob to open it and look outside. Now as this was happening, my sister pulled into the driveway from a very late date and felt someone staring at her. We had 40-foot pine trees lining our driveway and she thought someone was hiding in them, so she got her key ready and made a dash for the front door. She got her key into the doorknob, but the usually easy-to-open doorknob wouldn't budge. My mom was on the other side trying to open it, but it wouldn't budge for her either. Then all at once the door let loose and they both fell into the entranceway. I thought maybe I was going crazy until I heard this. We all felt it was Uncle Jim coming back to Lisa one last time to say that they were okay, or maybe he was lost and didn't realize he had died, and being my mom and I were sensitive, he was drawn to us. I don't know, but I do know that was the scariest paranormal thing that happened to me in that house until a year later. It was the middle of the 7th lunar month on the Chinese calendar, the Festival of Ghosts. Oddly enough, my school organized a parents-teacher meeting that night to discuss some matters pertaining to the school. That night, the parents were inside the hall while a bunch of my friends and I were loitering around the school compound. All 6 of us, Joe, Brad, Jenny, Chrissy, my sister and I, sat down in the middle of the basketball court playing a game of dare. We were having lots of fun until Chrissy dared Brad to go to a hidden place behind the school and come back. My school is big and old. It has a lot of hidden places that only few students and teachers know of. One of our favorite spots is this slopey open area at the back of the school. We nicknamed it House San, literally Backhill. We often go there to have a little picnic during lunch hour, but we had never been near it at night. There were stories from the seniors that a girl hanged herself there in the past, and had since haunted the place at night. To go there, one has to go through a series of steps and through a gate. The place is not lit at night, and on a moonless night like that night, one could easily get lost inside. Anyway, Brad chickened out, saying that the story was true and that he won't go up. However, my sister suggested that we tie ourselves to one another with a long rope and got up there together. It sounded like a good idea. After all, not many believed the story. So, we found a rope and we were all set to venture into Hudson in the dark. We walked carefully up the stairs. No doubt all of us had our fears, but nobody dared to say anything. It was so dark we could hardly see each other. After passing the gate, I realized the knot of the rope was untied and I've lost everyone. I was really scared by then. I didn't know what to do, but no better than to venture further into the dark. So, I quickly turned around and headed back down. Just as I was about to leave, I heard a voice saying, "Going so soon?" The voice was so eerie and spooky. I knew it couldn't have been my friend's, so I just ignored it and climbed down the stairs. While descending the stairs, I could sense a strong smell of burning candles. I ran to the basketball court hoping that the rest would be there waiting for me. But there was no one there. I was too petrified to go back into Hudson to look for them, so I decided to wait for them there. A few minutes passed before Joe came back, followed by my sister, Brad, and Jenny. Apparently, everyone was separated once we passed the gate, and no one knew where Chrissy was. We were worried for Chrissy. We decided to go near the stairs and shout for her. We were too afraid to go inside again. Chrissy only showed herself almost an hour later. When she came down, she was so pale and so scared that she was shivering in a state of shock. None of them heard any voices, even though everyone smelt the burning candle. Chrissy, however, encountered the ghost of the girl who hanged herself there. Chrissy told us her story later. "We had just passed the gate when I realized I had lost you guys. The rope was like cut, and it was totally silent in there. I called out for you all, but nobody answered me. I was getting really scared by then. I looked around in the dark and all I could see was a bright red glow near a tree. I didn't know what to do and I thought you guys might be there. So, I headed towards the light. I got to some bushes near a tree, but I couldn't find the source of the red glow in that area. Then I suddenly felt some water dripping onto my face. I thought it was raining, but when I looked above, I saw a girl hang to the tree with a noose on her neck, and she was staring down at me, smiling an evil grin. The water dripping down on me was actually blood. I was so scared I just ran away. I kept turning to look behind and she would always be near. I wasn't sure if she was chasing me or I just never moved a bit even though I ran with all my might. A short moment later, I think I tripped over something as I remember I fell to the ground and fainted. When I woke up, I heard people calling me from afar. I was hoping it was you guys. I walked towards the noises and soon I came upon the gate. And yes, as I was climbing down the stairs, there was this strong and peculiar smell, like something being burnt. Brad interrupted. It was the smell of candles burning. We all smelt it too, but no one saw anything. Anyway, I was too afraid to give it much thought then. You couldn't imagine how relieved I was to see you all then. Chrissy was clearly terrified. After that incident, we no longer venture into Hudson. Nevertheless, we did some research and found out from some teachers the story of the girl who hanged herself there. Apparently, she was pregnant with her boyfriend's baby. Feeling completely lost and helpless, she hanged herself there one afternoon. Some 3 months later, her boyfriend was killed in a car crash. His face bore a horrified look, his eyes wide opened, as if he had seen a ghost. I was on a trekking tour out in Taman Negara, Malaysia. Real inner jungle. Trekking, they called it 2 hours upriver in a dugout canoe, 8 sweaty kilometers into the heart of the forest, staying the night in a big cave called Gua Besar. We get to our stopping point that afternoon, drop our things off in the cave, and then head back outside to collect firewood. As we walk, I ask our guide, Richard, what we'd be building the fire for, and he replies, "Oh, cooking." And then, under his breath, "And protection." I overhear this last bit and laugh. Protection? Protection from what, tigers? Nagara is 43,000 square kilometers, roughly the size of New Hampshire and Vermont, put together, and the tiger population is thought to number less than 200. There's no way there are any tigers nearby that we would need to defend against. And yet, instead of laughing off my sarcasm, Richard wheels and glares at me. "We do not," he hisses, "make jokes about tigers. Especially not around the other tourists." Woof. Touchy. We walk down a small path and split up to gather wood. Richard disappears from sight, and when he comes back he has his arm full of timber, but he's also wearing a troubled look on his face. I ask him what's the matter, and at first he blows me off. But I, being nosy, press the point, and so he takes me aside and motions in the direction he just came from. "Did you see that small cave back there, underneath our sleeping cave?" "Sure, what of it?" "Did you notice the smell?" And now that he mentions it, there was a distinct must to the area. I'd chalked it up to normal cave mustiness, but when I offer this hypothesis, he shakes his head. "It's not the cave. Something's dead, inside. The cave is a den." I want to ask him what kind of den, what kind of animal, is it an active den, these kinds of things, but at this point the other tourists come back, and with a meaningful look Richard cuts our conversation short. That evening we make a delicious batch of cave stew, plant candles all around the cave, and stoke up a nice crackler of a blaze, and people start to settle in for the night. I, however, am antsy. I generally avoid tours, but I signed on to this one for the explicit purpose of night walking in the real inner jungle. I'd gone on night walks around HQ, and they yielded some cool animals, mouse, deer, scorpions, flying lizards, etc., but generally the farther you get from civilization, the more you see. I wanted to find tapirs, pythons, maybe even elephants. And so I said to Richard, "Richard, I think I'm going to go on a night walk." He's surprisingly open to this and says, "Okay. But just stay in this area." And he points to a small patch of ground immediately outside the cave, 3 meters by 3 meters across and containing a single tree. At this I laugh and shake my head. "No, Richard, I mean a real night walk." He nods thoughtfully and then with great earnestness says, "Okay, no problem. I'll go with you." Which would be fine, but upon hearing that Richard is going, 3 giggly tourists decide to come along, as well. Our group can be heard for miles, and we don't see a damn thing. After 15 minutes Richard takes us back to the cave, and I again take him aside. "Richard, you and I both know that was a really bad night walk. I think I'm going to go out, and this time, alone." Richard immediately shoots me down. "No! This is not like HQ, this is the real, inner jungle. Here there are leopards, and cobras, and tigers, and if you're in a group that's okay, but as one person they will wait for you in the trees, and watch you, and when you least expect it, they will pounce, and you will be eaten." Okay, duly noted, but frankly I think Richard is a bit of a sensationalist. So for 10 minutes I reason with him, assuring him that I'm very observant, I've done his before, and the risk is very low. I wheedle, I cajole, and though he's not happy about it he eventually agrees on the conditions that A, I only go out for 40 minutes, and B, I take his machete with me. His dull machete hardly posed a threat to the vegetables we chopped up for our stew that evening. If I actually needed to use it against an attacking animal, I think it would only be good for putting up a symbolic resistance. But okay, Richard, sure. And so I walk out into the darkened jungle with a headlamp and a machete. It is 10 p.m. I turn left from the cave entrance, and for 20 minutes I prowl through the forest, sighting a mouse, deer, and an 8-inch spider along the way. Cool. But soon enough my path has brought me back to the cave, and I still have another 20 minutes before I promised Richard I'd return. I peer off to the right, in the direction of the den, and with overconfidence born of skepticism and an unhealthy feeling of invincibility, I tread off towards it. I draw up right across from the den, and the odor is rank. I can't believe I thought that was a normal cave smell, there's definitely something rotting inside. But I shine my flashlight into the cave, and no one is home, either the den has been abandoned, or its resident is out for the night. I hope for the former. In front of me, the path leads beyond the den, but I decide not to continue if there is some predator living there. I don't want to get in between it and its home. So instead I plant myself across from the entrance, and sweep my flashlight beam across the foliage. Left. Right. Left. And suddenly, it's right there. 15 meters in front of me, a pair of the biggest, brightest eyes I've ever seen flare up out of the darkness. They are bright yellow, they are the size of ping-pong balls, and they don't shine so much as they glow. I've seen my fair share of prey animals at night, and I know generally how they behave. Somber deer, hogs, civet cats, they all startle and stare at you, transfixed in the beam, and when they run they do so noisily, frantically. These eyes were not the eyes of a prey animal. These eyes scanned the forest slowly, with the cool malevolence of an animal that doesn't need to consider anything higher up on the food chain. These were the eyes of a predator. Immediately I am drenched in sweat, and the machete is up in the air, its tip shaking uncontrollably. There is thick vegetation between me and the creature, and so I can't quite make out the body, but faintly, behind the glow of the eyes, I think I see stripes. If it is a tiger, 15 meters is nothing, it could be on me in an instant. I stand stock still, my heart pounding in my ears, watching as the eyes first scan one way, and then the other. And then in complete silence they turn, and the animal vanishes from sight. Which is almost worse. Before I knew where the animal was now, it could very well be circling around, to ambush me from behind. I spin on my heel and I sprint harder than I've ever sprinted before, my bobbing light recalling a scene from the Blair Witch Project, the nighttime screeching of the cicadas doing nothing for my stress levels. I don't slow until I'm well within our sleeping cave. Richard is up still, tending the fire. Richard! I pant. Saw something, by the den, huge eyes, like a cat. He looks up at me, the look on his face equal parts concern and, I told you so. What color were the eyes? He asks. Yellow! Bright yellow! He looks away into the fire, musing. Huh! Well, that was probably a tiger. That night I moved my sleeping bag as close to the interior wall of the cave as possible, and still I don't sleep a wink. My heart pounds through the rest of the night, my ears straining to interrogate the source of every snapping twig and crackling leaf. Fortunately, the fire provides good protection, and no one is eaten by a tiger that night. 2 more details. The next day, we walk a further 6 kilometers through the jungle, and met up with a boat waiting to take us back to HQ. Richard speaks with the boatman, a member of the local Orang Asli tribe, for a couple minutes, and when he comes back, he looks a little traumatized. I just spoke with the boatman, he says, and the Orang Asli know that den. They say it used to be empty, but now there is a tiger living there, the biggest, oldest tiger they know of. Why do you take tourists to this place? And back at the HQ, we chat with the manager, who finds the whole situation more humorous than he probably should. Richard tells me you saw a tiger on your trip. You know, if it was a tiger, he tells me, smirking, you didn't really need to worry. Generally, tigers will just play with you. What, like a cat plays with a mouse? Comforting. Truly, deeply comforting. In any case, I survived to tell the tale, though I probably lost a few years off my life to that stressful night. You can be sure, though, that was the last time I blew off a local guide's warnings as sensationalist. It was a sweltering summer night when I was around 12 years old, living with my family in a cozy apartment on the 3rd floor. Like many evenings in our neighborhood, frequent power outages were not uncommon, leaving us with limited options to beat the heat. Our usual solution was to gather on the long balcony that led to the main door of our apartment, or sometimes, we'd climb to the rooftop for a breath of fresher air. On one particular night, the oppressive heat lingered well into the evening, and the electricity remained elusive. We decided to make the best of it, sitting outside, chatting, and waiting for the power to return. As the clock struck 11 p.m., exhaustion took its toll on us, and we decided to sleep right there on the balcony under the starlit sky. My mother and younger brother, however, were not ready to call it a night and stayed inside occupied with some tasks. My father and I dozed off, the gentle night breeze providing some relief from the heat. It wasn't long before I was roused from my light slumber by a sound that cut through the silence like a knife, a chilling scream for help. The voice, male and desperate, echoed through the night. My eyes shot open, and in the dimness, I could make out my father peacefully asleep beside me. For a moment, I hesitated. Fear clutched at my chest as I debated waking my father. Something held me back, an inexplicable force that kept me paralyzed. The voice continued, alternating between distant and agonizingly near, as if the source was in constant motion. My surroundings seemed to blur as I drifted in and out of consciousness, haunted by the spectral cries that permeated the air. The night wore on, and with each passing hour, the screams persisted, growing more guttural and unsettling. I wrestled with the idea of waking my family, but an inexplicable dread restrained me. The voice seemed to dance between reality and the edges of a nightmare, leaving me uncertain about its origin. As the clock struck midnight, I jolted awake once more, drenched in a cold sweat. The balcony felt different, as if the atmosphere itself had thickened with an unseen tension. The screams continued, but this time, they seemed to be encircling our apartment building, closing in like a predator stalking its prey. I strained my ears, attempting to discern any other sounds, the stirrings of my family, the distant hum of the city, but all was eerily silent. The screams grew closer, more frenzied, and an unsettling realization dawned upon me: the voice was heading towards our balcony. I sat up, heart pounding, and scanned the darkness. The spectral wails were now just beyond our reach, a malevolent force drawing near. Fear clung to me like a suffocating shroud as the source of the screams remained elusive. Unable to bear the torment any longer, I finally mustered the courage to wake my father. His eyes met mine, clouded with confusion and sleep. The screams, however, persisted, growing louder and more deranged. The world outside our balcony felt distorted, as if it had morphed into a surreal nightmare. "Can't you hear that?" I pleaded with my father, the desperation in my voice mirroring the desperation in the relentless cries for help. He listened intently, the color draining from his face. "What is that?" he muttered, his gaze fixated on the darkness beyond. As we grappled with the reality of the situation, the screams abruptly ceased. The sudden silence was more disconcerting than the unearthly cries that had filled the night. A heavy tension hung in the air, and we exchanged uneasy glances. Morning light eventually broke, bringing with it an uneasy calm. My family emerged from the apartment, the events of the night etched in our weary expressions. I recounted the night's horrors to my mother and brother, hoping for an explanation or shared experience, but their faces remained blank. Days turned into weeks, and we scoured the local news for any mention of the chilling screams that had haunted our sleepless night. To our bewilderment, there was no record of such an incident. The ordeal remained confined to our shared memory, a disturbing enigma that lingered like an unspoken curse. Years later, as an 18-year-old, I cautiously broached the topic with my brother, hoping that time might have jogged his memory. Yet, to my dismay, he could not recall the events of that fateful night. Skepticism clouded his expression as he suggested that perhaps it was a vivid dream, or a product of a half-asleep mind. The mystery endured, shrouded in the shadows of that enigmatic night. I often found myself contemplating whether the haunting screams were a manifestation of a dormant horror or a shared nightmare that visited only me. The uncertainty of that night, the unanswered questions, and the lingering fear etched a tale of horror that transcended the boundaries of sleep and wakefulness, an unexplained chapter in the recesses of my memory. My friends and I embarked on a clandestine adventure into the depths of the abandoned prison. Little did we know that the shadows that clung to those crumbling walls held secrets more unsettling than any ghostly apparition. We slipped through the corroded gates, our footsteps muffled by the eerie silence that enveloped the desolate corridors. The air hung heavy with the weight of forgotten anguish, and the flickering lights cast unsettling shadows that danced along the decaying cell blocks. As we delved deeper, an invisible force seemed to guide us, leading us to the heart of the prison's secrets. Cell block after cell block, the darkness clung to us like a sinister accomplice. Whispers echoed through the narrow hallways, faint murmurs that seemed to beckon us into the labyrinthine maze. Our flashlights quivered as we ventured further, the anticipation of the unknown tightening its grip on our hearts. In cell block 12, the temperature dropped, and a bone-chilling wind whispered through the gaps in the walls. We were not alone. The walls seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, and the shadows coalesced into ethereal forms that slithered along the floor. Dread consumed us as the walls themselves seemed to breathe, exhaling secrets from a time long gone. As we explored, a dissonant symphony of creaking doors and phantom footsteps accompanied our every move. The air vibrated with a spectral energy, and a disembodied laughter echoed through the corridor. Panic set in, and we quickened our pace, only to find ourselves trapped in a maze of twisting hallways, the walls closing in on us like the bars of a sinister cage. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted, and the walls seemed to absorb our fear, manifesting it into ghastly apparitions. Faces contorted in agony pressed against the rusted bars, their eyes pleading for release from an eternal torment. The prison itself seemed to come alive, as if the very bricks and mortar retained the memories of the suffering endured within its confines. The night air hung heavy with an eerie stillness as I stirred from my slumber in the middle of the wilderness. The shadows danced on the walls of the tent, illuminated by the soft glow of the moon overhead. I could feel an unusual tension in the air, a silent prelude to something mysterious and unsettling. As I opened my eyes, I noticed my mom sitting upright, her silhouette outlined against the dim interior of the tent. A chill ran down my spine as I heard her gasp, a sound that sliced through the stillness of the night. Instinctively, I began to ask her what was wrong, but before the words could escape my lips, her hand covered my mouth. Her wide eyes locked onto mine, conveying a sense of urgency and fear. The silence around us was deafening, broken only by the rustling of leaves in the breeze and the distant hooting of an owl. Something was amiss, and the atmosphere crackled with an unspoken tension. I strained my ears to listen, and that's when I heard it, footsteps, deliberate and close, as if the very earth beneath us held its breath. The seconds stretched into an eternity as we lay there, paralyzed by the uncertainty of the situation. The darkness outside seemed to press against the thin fabric of the tent, and the air became charged with an inexplicable sense of danger. My heart thudded in my chest, and every nerve in my body tingled with a primal awareness. Then, a shiver ran down my spine as the footsteps drew even closer, so close that I could almost feel the vibrations through the ground. Panic gripped me, but my mom's urgent gaze held me in place, her finger pressed against her lips, imploring silence. The footsteps seemed to encircle our tent, a rhythmic dance of foreboding that sent shivers down my spine. I strained my senses to discern any other sound, any clue as to the nature of the unseen intruder. The night seemed to conspire against us, shrouding the interloper in an impenetrable veil of darkness. The little flap covering the zipper on the tent began to flutter, a subtle movement that sent a jolt of terror through my veins. Someone, or something, was right beside us, separated only by the thin layer of fabric that shielded us from the unknown. My mom's grip on my mouth tightened, her eyes widening with a mixture of fear and caution. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead as my mind raced to make sense of the surreal tableau unfolding in the dead of the night. Were we being watched? Was this some nocturnal creature investigating the foreign presence in its domain? Or was it something more sinister, a human presence with intentions unknown? The footsteps ceased, and the night fell into a pregnant silence once again. The oppressive weight of the unknown hung in the air, making each breath feel like an audible intrusion into the clandestine dance of the night. My mom slowly removed her hand from my mouth, gesturing for me to remain silent. We exchanged a silent communication, a shared understanding that whatever lurked outside was still there, just beyond the canvas walls. With bated breath, we waited, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. The minutes felt like hours as the world outside our tent held its breath. Then, as if guided by an unseen force, the zipper on the tent began to move slowly, almost imperceptibly. My heart pounded in my chest, and I struggled to stifle the gasp threatening to escape my lips. The zipper continued its clandestine journey, the sound amplified by the silent night. My mom and I exchanged a glance, our eyes wide with a shared sense of trepidation. The flap separating us from the outside world gradually opened, revealing the inky darkness beyond. My breath caught in my throat as my mom reached for a flashlight, her movements deliberate and cautious. With a click, the flashlight pierced the darkness, its beam revealing the immediate surroundings of our tent. The light swept across the trees and bushes, dancing shadows playing tricks on our senses. And then, as the beam settled on a particular spot, our breath caught in unison. There, just a few feet away, stood a deer, a majestic buck with antlers that reached toward the sky. Its eyes reflected the flashlight's glow, casting an otherworldly gleam in the darkness. The tension that had gripped us slowly dissipated, replaced by a mixture of relief and awe. The majestic creature regarded us with a calm curiosity, its presence explaining the enigmatic footsteps and the mysterious rustling outside our tent. It seemed as though the nocturnal visitor had been merely passing through, perhaps drawn by the scent of our campsite or the intrigue of the unknown. As the realization sank in, my mom and I exchanged a mixture of laughter and relief. The fear that had gripped us now transformed into a shared sense of wonder at the unexpected encounter with nature's beauty. The deer, seemingly unperturbed by our presence, lingered for a moment longer before gracefully bounding away into the night. The atmosphere in the tent shifted from one of fear to one of shared understanding and connection with the wild. We lay back down, the adrenaline slowly receding, replaced by a newfound appreciation for the mysteries that the night held. The canvas walls, once a barrier between us and the unknown, now seemed like a fragile membrane connecting us to the wonders of the natural world. As we settled back into our sleeping bags, the night resumed its quiet serenade. The rustling leaves, the distant hooting of the owl, and the gentle breeze became the soundtrack of a night that had unfolded like a surreal tale. The encounter with the deer became a memory etched into the fabric of that camping trip, a story to be shared with incredulous smiles in the light of day. In the middle of the wilderness, under the vast canvas of the night sky, we drifted back into a peaceful slumber, grateful for the unexpected magic that had unfolded in the darkness. The footsteps that had initially sent shivers down our spines now became a testament to the untamed beauty that surrounded us, a reminder that nature's mysteries often unfold in the most unexpected ways. The room fell into a hushed stillness after the Ouija board spelled out the cryptic message. Knock. We exchanged uneasy glances, a palpable tension hanging in the air. The flickering candlelight cast shadows that danced on the walls, adding to the eerie atmosphere that had settled over the room. The realization that we were not alone, that something beyond our understanding was unfolding, sent a collective shiver down our spines. As we stared at the motionless planchette, the weight of the unspoken question lingered in the room. What was about to happen? Would the spirit fulfill the request made by our friend, proving its presence in a way that transcended the boundaries of the supernatural and ventured into the realm of the tangible? With bated breath, we turned our attention to the window, the source of the mysterious message. The lights outside bathed the surroundings in an artificial glow, revealing the stillness of the night. The trees stood sentinel in the darkness, their branches casting eerie shadows on the windowpane. We strained our eyes, searching for any sign of movement or a logical explanation for the peculiar message. Suddenly, the room was pierced by a series of sharp raps on the window, rap, rap, rap. We recoiled, our eyes widening with a mixture of shock and disbelief. The knocks echoed through the room, each one sending a jolt through our senses. It was as if an unseen force had responded to our request, materializing in the form of a sound that defied explanation. We stared at the window in stunned silence, our minds racing to comprehend the inexplicable. The lights outside revealed nothing, no figures, no pranksters, nothing that could account for the distinct rapping on the windowpane. A collective sense of unease settled over the group, our initial skepticism now replaced by a shared realization that we were entangled in a web of the supernatural. Tom, the self-proclaimed expert, was the first to break the silence. "Did anyone see anything out there?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. My friends shook their heads, their eyes fixed on the window as if expecting the answer to materialize before them. As the room hung in suspense, Emily hesitantly spoke up, her voice shaky yet determined. Maybe we should try asking more questions. See if we can get some answers about who or what we're dealing with. The group, though apprehensive, nodded in agreement. The Ouija board, now charged with an energy that transcended mere amusement, beckoned us to continue our exploration of the unknown. With a collective breath, we directed our attention back to the board, our fingers resting on the planchette as if in communion with forces beyond our control. Who are you? Jake asked, his voice tinged with a mixture of curiosity and trepidation. The planchette responded with deliberate movements, spelling out letters that formed a name none of us expected. Mary. We exchanged puzzled glances. None of us knew anyone named Mary who could be connected to this mysterious night. Mary, are you the one who knocked on the window? Tom queried, his skepticism now tempered by a growing sense of respect for the inexplicable. The planchette moved again, spelling out words that conveyed a fragmented story of a spirit seeking connection and understanding. Mary, it seemed, had a tale to tell, and we were unwittingly becoming participants in her spectral narrative. As we delved deeper into the conversation with Mary, the room became a vessel for the supernatural. The Ouija board, a conduit between the living and the dead, unveiled details of Mary's life, a tragic tale of love, loss, and a lingering sense of unfinished business that bound her spirit to the earthly realm. We listened with a mixture of fascination and unease as Mary's story unfolded. Her presence, once perceived as a mere manifestation of amusement, now carried the weight of a restless soul seeking solace and closure. The knocks on the window, it seemed, were a plea for acknowledgement, a tangible sign of her existence beyond the confines of the Ouija board. Despite the gravity of Mary's narrative, we couldn't shake the eerie feeling that we were stepping into a realm where the lines between reality and the supernatural blurred. The once playful gathering had transformed into a séance of sorts, a communion with forces that challenged our understanding of the world. As the night wore on, we continued our conversation with Mary, asking questions that probed the depths of her spectral existence. The room, now bathed in the soft glow of the candlelight, became a sanctuary for the inexplicable. We, once bound by the lightheartedness of our gatherings, found ourselves drawn into a world where the supernatural and the mundane coexisted. In a moment of shared curiosity and trepidation, one of us, sensing a connection with Mary, asked, "Is there anything we can do to help you find peace?" The planchette hesitated for a moment before spelling out a series of instructions, rituals, ceremonies, and a request to revisit a place laden with memories from Mary's past. The weight of Mary's request hung in the air, and we exchanged uncertain glances. It was as if we had become unwilling participants in a spectral quest, a journey that required us to navigate the delicate balance between the living and the dead. As the first light of dawn began to seep through the curtains, we made a collective decision. We would follow Mary's instructions, venture into the realms of the supernatural, and attempt to bring closure to a restless spirit. The Ouija board, now a conduit for a spectral connection, stood as both a guide and a harbinger of the unknown. In the days that followed, we embarked on a journey that blurred the boundaries between the rational and the supernatural. Guided by Mary's instructions, we explored forgotten places, conducted rituals, and sought to unravel the threads of a story that transcended the confines of our understanding. The journey became a testament to the resilience of our friendship in the face of the inexplicable. As we delved deeper into the mysteries surrounding Mary, we discovered not only the complexities of the supernatural but also the enduring power of connection, a bond that traversed the realms of the living and the dead. The knocks on the window, once a source of fear and uncertainty, now echoed as a testament to the shared experiences that had unfolded in the quiet hours of the night. We, forever changed by our encounter with the supernatural, found solace in the belief that sometimes, the mysteries of the unknown held the keys to unlocking the profound truths that lingered beyond the veil. As the Ouija board rested in a corner, its planchette silent and still, we carried with us the indelible mark of a night that had begun as a light-hearted gathering and evolved into a journey into the uncharted territories of the supernatural. The boundary between skepticism and belief had been blurred, and we, united by an otherworldly encounter, stepped back into the daylight with a newfound understanding of the mysteries that linger in the shadows of the unknown. The night was dark, and the air was thick with anticipation as our group of friends gathered in the old, abandoned mansion on the outskirts of town. We were drawn to the eerie charm of the place, its creaking floorboards and the whispering winds that seemed to carry secrets from a bygone era. Little did we know that this night would unravel into a tale of mystery and suspense that none of us could have foreseen. The atmosphere inside was charged with excitement as we settled into the dusty living room. We decided to play a game of truth or dare to spice up the night. The dim light from the flickering candles cast eerie shadows on the walls, setting the perfect stage for the unfolding drama. As we began the game, laughter echoed through the old mansion, mingling with the distant howling of the wind outside. I sat on the worn-out couch, surrounded by friends, each of us taking turns choosing between truth and dare. The air was thick with tension as the dares became more daring and the truths more revealing. The old mansion seemed to embrace the secrets whispered within its walls, as if it had a life of its own. It was my turn, and I chose truth. A mischievous grin spread across the face of my friend, Jake, as he formulated his question. But just as he opened his mouth, the room plunged into darkness. The candles flickered and died, leaving us in complete blackness. Panic set in as we groped around in the dark, trying to make sense of the situation. The sudden blackout lasted for what felt like an eternity, though it was likely no more than 10 seconds. When the lights finally came back on, the room was engulfed in a stunned silence. The air seemed heavier, and an unspoken fear settled over us like a shroud. As our eyes adjusted to the light, we realized that something had changed. Amidst the circle of friends, one person was missing. Sarah, who had been sitting right next to me moments before, was nowhere to be found. A collective gasp escaped our lips as we frantically searched the room, calling her name. The old mansion felt colder, and the wind outside seemed to mock us with its mournful howls. As we combed through the rooms, the truth dawned on us. Sarah was gone. Vanished in the blink of an eye during those 10 seconds of darkness. Fear crept into our hearts as we considered the impossible, that something malevolent lurked within the mansion, preying on us when we least expected it. The atmosphere shifted from playful to dire as we realized the severity of the situation. Panic set in, and accusations flew like sparks in the night. The air was thick with suspicion as each of us wondered who among us could have orchestrated such a sinister act. I couldn't shake the feeling that the answers were hidden within the mansion itself, that the creaking floorboards and the echoing whispers held the key to Sarah's disappearance. Determined to uncover the truth, I suggested we split up and search the mansion room by room. Reluctantly, my friends agreed, each taking a different corridor, their footsteps echoing through the empty halls. I wandered through the dimly lit corridors, my heart pounding with every step. The mansion seemed to come alive with mysterious sounds, distant footsteps, the rustling of curtains, and an occasional draft that sent shivers down my spine. The walls themselves seemed to watch, their faded wallpaper concealing the mansion's ancient secrets. As I entered a particularly eerie room, I felt a sudden chill in the air. The room was filled with antique furniture covered in dusty sheets, and the only source of light was a single, dim lamp in the corner. I hesitated for a moment, feeling an inexplicable sense of foreboding. Just as I was about to turn away, my eyes caught something, a hidden door behind an old bookshelf. Intrigued, I approached it cautiously, my fingers brushing against the dusty spines of forgotten novels. With a creak, the hidden door swung open, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. Compelled by an irresistible urge to uncover the truth, I descended into the depths of the mansion. The air grew colder with each step, and the sounds of the outside world faded away. The staircase seemed to stretch on endlessly, leading me to a subterranean chamber that was a stark contrast to the decaying grandeur above. The chamber was dimly lit by flickering torches, revealing a room adorned with mysterious symbols and ancient artifacts. In the center of the room stood an ornate pedestal, upon which lay a tattered book bound in leather. As I approached, a sense of trepidation filled the air, as if the very walls were whispering their secrets to me. Opening the book, I discovered a dark history hidden within the mansion's past. It spoke of a long-forgotten ritual that required the sacrifice of a soul every decade to appease an otherworldly force. The last entry detailed the events of tonight, the truth or dare game, the blackout, and the disappearance of Sarah. As the realization sank in, I felt a presence behind me. Turning slowly, I found myself face to face with a ghostly figure, a spectral entity that seemed to embody the malevolence lurking within the mansion. It spoke with a chilling voice, revealing that the ancient pact demanded a life, and Sarah had become the unwitting victim. Haunted by the knowledge that our innocent game had triggered a chain of events beyond our control, I confronted the entity. It explained that the mansion thrived on the fear and suspense of its occupants, using their vulnerability to open a gateway between worlds. Sarah's disappearance was the price we had unknowingly paid for disturbing the mansion's ancient slumber. Determined to right the wrongs and free Sarah from her spectral prison, I devised a plan to disrupt the ritual and close the gateway. The entity, though malevolent, seemed bound by the rules of its own existence and agreed to guide me through the necessary steps. The night wore on as I navigated the darkened corridors, retracing the steps of our ill-fated game. The entity whispered ancient incantations, and we reached the room where the truth or dare game had taken a sinister turn. As the ritual reached its climax, the mansion seemed to quake with unseen forces. Suddenly, the room was filled with blinding light, and the malevolent presence dissipated. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, and the mansion returned to its quiet, abandoned state. But Sarah was nowhere to be found. In the aftermath, the truth of the mansion's dark history was sealed within its walls once more. The entity, bound by the disrupted ritual, faded into the shadows. As for Sarah, her fate remained unknown, a lingering mystery that haunted our memories. The group reconvened, solemn and changed by the events that transpired. We left the mansion, its secrets buried in the past, but the weight of the night clung to us like a ghostly presence. One day in late summer when my daughter was 3 years old, I put my newborn son in the stroller, and took them both out to the park. My daughter played with other kids, did her rounds on the swing, slides and other fun playground rides, and then it was time to go home. I needed to feed my little one, and the evening was slowly creeping in. We went towards our apartment building, and my daughter was running around me, picking flowers and leaves, chatting about what some little girl said to her in the playground. The entrance of the building is facing the playground. It stands on a wide plateau, next to a bank, a library, some weird workplace injuries office, pizza place, and a grocery store. There are also pillars on the plateau, and my daughter loves to hide behind them, screaming with laughter when I look for her and finally find her. She ran and disappeared. There was a sudden jolt in my heart, but I dismissed it. I called her name and started looking for her, saying the same silly things as every time. Where is my little girl? Oh no, the goblin stole her. Or she is playing tricks on her mommy. Ready or not, here I come. Whenever we played like this, I could hear her giggling behind one of the pillars. Not this time. Evening was coming, slowly turning the brightness of the day into heavy dusk. My voice became strange as I called her name, half playing, half panicking. Silence was loud with the complete lack of her reply. I felt as if my heart was ripped out of my body. I knew she was not there. I walked fast around the plateau, looking behind the pillars, now yelling her name loudly, trying to be strict and order her to come. Stop playing, and come here right now. But there was nothing. I realized that I had a baby in a stroller, and that I was not mobile enough to start running, in search of her. I couldn't leave my baby, but time was passing with my daughter gone, and I had none to lose. I ran into my building, banging on the door of our apartment. My mother opened it, startled by the look on my face. I pushed the stroller in and yelled besides myself. "Mom, I lost her!" And I ran outside. As I ran out, I saw a neighbor with her little son. I told her my daughter was gone, and she ran into the playground to inform the other parents, so they can look for her across the playground. Then I ran through the plateau, down to the pavement next to a busy street, and towards the parking lot. My brain became a battlefield. I needed to stay collected and take action, so as I was running, I kept calling her name. I was calling my husband at work, asking him to inform the police so I can keep searching, not wasting time on the phone. At the same time, there was loud screaming inside my soul. It was filled with desperation. A parking lot. If someone threw her in their car, she could be at the other end of the city already, and I could run as much as I want, but she would be gone. I saw her in someone's car, scared, crying. I saw her hurt, raped, sold. I heard her cry for mommy and daddy and her little brother. And I felt my womb empty as death. As I ran and called out for her, I saw an old woman in the distance, walking across the field next to my daughter's kindergarten. The woman was holding a little girl by the hand, and they were walking together. It was my child. But I did not recognize her. I was so scared, desperately needing to do something, that when I saw the woman and a little girl, I literally did not recognize my own daughter for a few moments. I did not dare to hope. And I could not waste time on some woman and her granddaughter, while I needed to search for my child. And then I heard the most beautiful word in this universe. Mommy! As I heard this, I saw her running across the field towards me. My knees buckled, and I went down. She ran into my embrace, and it felt as if life returned into my blood. I grabbed her as a drowning man grabs a hand that offers salvation. I collected myself so I would not scare her, and sat on the bench with her in my lap. She had gone for a little walk. She thought I was coming, too. She didn't mean to. She wanted to show me how grown up she was. The old lady said my daughter came up to her and said, "Hi, lady, I lost my mother. Her name is Iva, and if you see her, can you please tell her that I am looking for her?" And so the lady took her hand in search of mommy, or police. I thanked the old woman profusely and invited her inside for coffee and cake, but she declined and went on. I informed my husband and the neighbors that the little fugitive had been found. Then I took my daughter inside. I made her cocoa and we sat down on the couch together, wrapped in the blanket. We talked. I told her about what she means to me. I told her about the time she was in my belly. I spoke about her birth and wonderful times when she was a baby. I told her about illnesses, laughter, crying, about trips, about learning to crawl and walk. I told her about her first words, dances, little accidents. I told her I love her. And then I explained to her how I felt when I thought that she was gone, and that I might never see her again. I told her how dangerous it can be to wander away like that. She hugged me tightly and said, "I will never do that again, Mommy." Then the evening continued normally. She played. Her baby brother cooed. I put them to sleep with stories, lullabies and kisses. After they fell asleep, I sat down and met my own heart. It was bruised. It is a horrible, horrifying love, a love that a parent has for her child. I never knew that I could love anything or anyone this much. My children are a part of my own being, my flesh, my blood, my heart, my breath, my all. I had always prided myself on being the local cop who knew every nook and cranny of our small town. But one case had always haunted me, a chilling mystery that seemed to defy resolution. It was the cold case of 3 girls who vanished without a trace in 1978. It was a quiet afternoon when they went missing after school, leaving behind a town steeped in sorrow and confusion. For years, I found myself revisiting the old case files, chasing down leads that had long gone cold. The community had moved on, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something dark lingered beneath the surface. In 2008, fate dealt me a twisted hand. 3 girls, with the same names as those from 1978, disappeared under eerily similar circumstances. It was as if the past had risen from the depths to taunt me. The decision to reopen the case was not an easy one. The wounds from the first disappearances were still fresh in the minds of many, and the mere mention of those names sent shivers down the spines of those who remembered. Yet I couldn't turn away from the uncanny connection between the 2 sets of disappearances. It felt like a puzzle, and I was determined to find the missing pieces. The first step was to dive back into the old case files. Dust-covered boxes filled with faded photographs, witness statements, and yellowed newspaper clippings became my companions. Each page held a clue, a potential link between the past and the present. As I pored over the details, I felt the weight of time pressing down on me, urging me to unravel the mystery that had eluded us for decades. The similarities were impossible to ignore. The 1978 girls, Sarah, Emily, and Abigail, and the 2008 girls bearing the same names had all vanished on their way home from school. The coincidences were too precise to be dismissed as mere chance. It was as if the town was caught in a nightmarish loop, reliving the same tragedy over and over again. The interviews began anew. Old witnesses, now weathered by time, were revisited, their memories strained to recall the events of that fateful day in 1978. I tread carefully, aware that reopening old wounds could stir up emotions buried for years. The town's reluctance to revisit the past was palpable, but I couldn't let the fear of unsettling the peace deter me. As I delved deeper into the investigation, I uncovered secrets that had long been buried. Families harbored dark memories, and whispers of a sinister underbelly within our seemingly idyllic town grew louder. The more I unraveled, the more I realized that the disappearances were not isolated incidents but part of a larger, more ominous tapestry. The clock ticked relentlessly as I followed every lead, my determination unwavering. The 2008 disappearances mirrored the past with an unsettling precision. It was as if the universe itself was conspiring to recreate the same tragic scenario. The pressure to solve the case intensified, fueled by the desperate need to prevent history from repeating itself once more. Late nights at the precinct turned into early mornings as I chased down every lead, no matter how obscure. The town, once a close-knit community, now seemed to harbor dark corners and hidden alleys that held the key to the mystery. I couldn't trust anyone entirely, not when the past and present were so intricately entwined. The breakthrough came in the form of an old photograph, tucked away in a forgotten corner of the case files. It depicted a group of people, faces long faded with time, standing near the spot where the 1978 girls were last seen. Among them was a figure I hadn't noticed before, a man whose gaze seemed to pierce through the lens, hauntingly familiar. With a renewed sense of urgency, I dug into the man's background, only to discover a web of connections that spanned decades. He was a shadow, slipping through the cracks of the past, leaving traces that hinted at a malevolent presence. The more I learned, the more I became convinced that he held the key to both sets of disappearances. Tracking him down became an obsession. I followed leads across state lines, chasing shadows that always seemed to slip through my fingers. The closer I got, the more the town seemed to close ranks, as if protecting a dark secret that had festered for far too long. One stormy night, the trail led me to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. The wind howled through broken windows, and the flickering light cast long, ominous shadows. As I cautiously stepped inside, the air grew thick with tension. It was a labyrinth of forgotten memories and hidden truths, and I knew that the answers were within reach. As I navigated the eerie silence, echoes of the past seemed to reverberate through the desolate corridors. Every creak, every distant sound, felt like a whisper from the missing girls, guiding me toward the heart of the mystery. The oppressive darkness seemed to close in, but I pressed on, my senses on high alert. The final confrontation unfolded in a dimly lit room at the heart of the warehouse. The man from the photograph stood there, a sinister smile playing on his lips. In that moment, the past and present collided, and the truth emerged like a specter from the shadows. He confessed to orchestrating both sets of disappearances, driven by a twisted desire to perpetuate a cycle of pain and anguish. His motive remained shrouded in madness, a dark secret that defied comprehension. The town, unwittingly complicit in his macabre game, had become a stage for his sinister acts. As I arrested him, the weight of decades of unresolved grief lifted, replaced by a chilling realization of the darkness that lurked beneath the surface. The town would never be the same, but perhaps, in confronting the demons of the past, a measure of healing could begin. The mystery that had consumed my career was finally laid to rest, but the scars it left behind ran deep. The missing girls, both from 1978 and 2008, were never truly found. Their absence became a haunting presence, a reminder that some mysteries defy resolution, and some wounds never fully heal. As I walked away from the warehouse, the storm outside mirrored the turmoil within. The town, forever changed by the revelations, grappled with the aftermath. The cold case that had defined my career was closed, but the specter of those lost girls lingered in the collective memory of the community. In the end, I couldn't help but wonder if the cycle had truly been broken or if, somewhere in the shadows, another mystery awaited, patiently biding its time. The small-town cop who had become entwined with the enigma of the missing girls knew that some secrets could never be fully unraveled, and the pursuit of truth often led down the darkest of paths. In 2006 I went to Mumbai with my friend for a few days. He had some work which took a couple of days to get done. We had 2 more days to roam around. I had never been to Mumbai before, but my friend did. So we decided to visit as much as famous places we can. We visited Gateway of India, Worli Sea Face, and many other that I don't remember now. But I remember going to Fashion Street to buy good quality cloths and cheaper price. My friend bought several shirts and pants, so did I. On the way back home, a guy selling white shirts on the street caught my attention. Though, I did lot of shopping, but I was really compelled to ask him price. 40 rupees each, he said. Whoa, that was really cheap. Texture was good, possibility of fading color was out of question. I decided to buy one. I returned to the hotel feeling happy. Next morning we came back to our hometown. Our boring routine life started again. I was busy going to college and study as we were close to exams. I used to stay up in the night to study. I was accompanied by my dog Rocky. All other family members were in deep sleep. It was around 1 a.m. All of a sudden, Rocky started growling and then barking in loud voice. He would bark, howl and growl, tugging his tail and his hind legs, looking at every corner of the room. What the hell is this? Rocky! Stop it! I shouted at him. But he didn't. He started scratching on the door, as if he wanted to go out ASAP. My mom knocked on the door. I opened the door. What is going on? She asked. I don't know, but he started barking all of a sudden. I pointed finger at Rocky, who was now hiding behind my mom and peeping at me. Go to bed now, it is too late, Mom ordered. That night I had some very bad dreams. I could hardly sleep. Next entire day I was busy meeting friends, taking down notes, talked about possible exam questions, etc. I returned tired. I was feeling sleepy. I had dinner somehow and went to the bed straight away. Night came with nightmares. At one point of time, I couldn't figure out if I am seeing it in the dream or is it happening in real. A black shadow was moving around my bed, whispering something. It would talk gibberish and chuckle. I screamed and woke up sweating. Next moment all my family members started pounding on the door till I opened it. Mom, I can't sleep here. I will sleep on sofa in the living room. Okay, but why didn't you take Rocky with you in the room today? I noticed Rocky would get into room before me every day. But that day I couldn't even see him around. Strange, I thought. I couldn't sleep that night again. Next day, I failed to concentrate on lectures due to lack of sleep, and when I returned home I was feeling too tired and feverish. Rocky! I called him while sitting on the sofa. He came at the main door staring at me. Come here, I said. But he didn't. He looked at me for a few seconds and ran away. It had never happened before. That night I did not expect to be too sick, but by the morning situation exacerbated, my parents had to rush me to the hospital. I was unconscious for a couple of days with high temperature. On day 3, I opened my eyes. Mom! Oh dear Mom! She didn't only spend her each minute sitting beside me but also put some photos of God and applied some holy ash on my forehead. On day 4, I left the hospital with the advice to rest for the entire week. Many of my relatives paid visits after hearing about my health. My maternal uncle came from Mumbai to see me. He is talkative and humorous. We talked about many things including my Mumbai visit. He asked me about the places I visited. I remembered buying a shirt for 40 rupees. I asked him, Uncle, I saw a guy selling white shirts for cheapest price. How can they afford it? My uncle laughed, and said, They make it out of the cloth used to cover dead bodies. They must have contacts with either hospital or cemetery. Don't buy one, did you? I was shivering. No, I did not, I murmured. I was 8 years old and staying the night at my best friend Ally's house. We had woken up quite early as children tend to do, and the house was absolutely quiet. Ally's parents were still sleeping soundly. The only people awake were Ally and I. We headed downstairs ready to make breakfast, which often consisted of Pop-Tarts and sugary cereals which I wasn't allowed too much of at my own house, so I tended to look forward to this bit. As we silently make our way closer to the kitchen on the cold hardwood, I hear a disembodied voice cut through the otherwise silent atmosphere. Hello? I froze in my tracks. It was a voice I didn't recognize. She sounded like a young girl. I've had experiences similar before, but nothing so direct, nothing so chilling. After being able to breathe again, I look over at my friend who had also seemed to freeze. I hesitated to ask. I didn't want her to think I was weird, but I needed to know I wasn't alone in this for once. Did you hear that? I peeped. Ally's eyes widened and she slowly nodded her head in reply, still holding her frozen stance. In a way I felt relieved but also horrified that my experience had been validated.